In this video, we're going to look at how to design a screened porch in Chief Architect. We're going to start by drawing deck railings and then modify the railings so that a post is going up to a beam supporting the roof. We will then look at two methods for applying the screen. The first method will be creating a 3D solid and then applying a material to it. And the second method will be creating a custom millwork symbol that combines the 3D solid, top rail, bottom rail, and balusters, and then the custom symbol will get applied as a panel to the deck railing. We will show how you can save time on your next project by adding these modified deck railings to your user catalog so that for your next project, all you have to do is click and draw the shape of the screen porch. And we will wrap up by designing a screen door and look at options for the beam placement and roof height above the door. So here we are in Chief, where we're going to start with the simple four-walled house in a slightly sloping terrain. The first step to designing our screen porch is to add deck railings. So I'm going to go over to our railing tools, select the straight deck railing, and click and draw the deck railings in the plan. Next, let's turn on our temporary dimensions, and then select the railing on the right, and then specify that the width of the screen porch should be 20 feet, and then that the distance from the house to the back railing should be 12 feet, and then turn off our temporary dimensions. And then holding Control on the keyboard, I'm going to make sure that I have all three railings selected, and then use the Center Object tool in the bottom toolbar, and then make sure that it's centered over the house. Next, if we come over to our 3D view, you can see how the deck came in, and the railings are currently 36 inches, and they are composed of our newels, rails, and balusters. If we take a look at the photo of the completed screen porch, what we need to do is we need to have our newels acting as posts going up to a beam. So let's add this. So in our 3D view, I'm going to press spacebar and then select all three of the deck railings. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, click on Open Object. And then if we come over to the panel on the left-hand side that says Wall Types, you can see that the wall type that we're using currently says Deck Railing Fence. And if we click on Define, this wall type is composed of a fir framing material and it's currently 3.5 inches thick. We're going to change this value to 5.5 inches, which will feed this thickness through other settings within our rail specification. And we'll get a message saying the main layer of the existing walls will be moved to account for this change. We'll click OK to that, and then in our 3D preview you can see how that was adjusted. On the left-hand side, let's go to the Rail Style panel. And the first adjustment we're going to make here is under Newels and Post. We're going to select Post to Beam. And in the 3D preview, you can see that we now have those newels acting as posts going up to a beam. Next, if we come over to this end, which is the start end, you can see that we currently have a half post. We can control whether the railings that meet the wall have a half post or a full post at the wall through this setting here in the middle. Let's go ahead and specify that where the posts meet the wall, we're always going to have a full post on the start post and the end post. Next, if we come over to newels and balusters on the left-hand side, you can see that the posts are currently 3.5 inches wide. And if we check on the setting for use wall width, the program will use that 5.5 inch value for the wall width that we specified earlier. Here you can specify your maximum on-center spacing for the posts. And then next, let's adjust our beam size by going over to the rails option on the left-hand side. And here you can see our beam is currently 5.5 inches by 8 inches high. And let's adjust this value to be 9.25 inches high, and press Tab. And you can see that update in our 3D preview. And let's go ahead and click on OK. And you can see how Chief added those posts and beams to the plan. Next, let's get a roof over our screened porch. So I'm going to click in the middle of the room, and then in the bottom left-hand corner, click on Open Object. And while we're in our room specification, let's make a handful of changes to our settings. Under Room Type, we're going to come here and type in Screened Porch so that it displays that way in our floor plan view. Next, if we come over to the Structure panel, here's where you can check that setting for the roof over this room. And we're also going to check this setting for Use Soft Fit Surface for Ceiling, which will ensure that the interior surface of the roof has one continuous flat surface. A few other settings to point out here. If you wanted to make adjustments to the deck planking or the deck joists, you can make those adjustments now. Or if you wanted to make adjustments to the deck support, including the deck beams, post and post footings, you can make those adjustments here. I'm fine with these settings how they are, so I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And you can see how the program added a hip style roof over our screen porch. And in this video, we're not going to make many modifications to the roof, but one adjustment I do want to make is to this end. I'm going to go ahead and select on this railing, and then in the bottom toolbar, change it to a gable wall. And when I click that, the program will generate a gable roof over that wall. And you'll notice that the program generated an attic wall between the beam and the roof. For the purpose of this video, I'm fine with this attic wall, but if you did not want this attic wall, you could get into your default settings, and under the wall default settings, uncheck automatically rebuild attic walls, and then select this attic wall and delete it, and then proceed to design what you would like in this space using the 3D Solid tools. For the next part of this video, let's go ahead and get the screen on all three sides of the railing. To do this, we're first going to get into an elevation view looking at the back railing, and then use the 3D Solid tool to add a 3D Solid over the area and change the 3D Solid to represent a screen. So let's go ahead and go back to our floor plan view, and you'll notice how our room label changed to say screen to porch there, and then we'll press spacebar, go up to our orthographic camera tools, select the cross-section elevation, and then just click and point it at our screen porch. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit, and then select the 3D Solid tool, and then get our 3D Solid to snap on this corner of the beam, and then left click and drag it down over to this side, and release our mouse, and then we'll select that 3D Solid, and then just make sure that we have it covering the post. And then let's double click on the 3D Solid, and under the depth, we're going to change that to be 3/16 of an inch, and press enter. And if we go over to our 3D view, you can see how that's coming in. And let's go back to our floor plan view, and you can see where that 3D Solid is located. And let's just make sure that we have it aligned with the back of this railing. So I'm going to come over to the 3D Solid and zoom in close, and then use our point-to-point move tool and select the first point on the 3D Solid, and then zoom out, and then select our point on the railing that we would like to move it to. And you can see how the program moved the 3D Solid into this space. And then if we go over to our 3D view, you can see how that's coming in. And then next, let's apply a screen material to the 3D Solid. So we're going to open up the library browser, and then you could search the library browser for a screened material. Because I'm going to be using a screened material a few times in this video, I already have one saved to my user catalog, and I'm going to select it, make sure that I'm in component mode, and then apply it to our 3D Solid, and you can see how that looks. Let's go ahead and close our library browser. And then the next step is to select this 3D Solid, make a copy of it, rotate it 90 degrees, and then get it positioned along the rail on the side. So let's go back to our floor plan view, and we're going to select on the 3D Solid, zoom out just a little bit, and then press the copy button in the bottom toolbar and paste it over in this area. And then we'll rotate it 90 degrees, and then holding control and use the move handle to get it close to where we want it up against the house. And then just zoom in and use the point-to-point move tool again to get it in position. And there we have it in position. And then let's zoom out and adjust it back to this side of the railing. And then we're going to select that 3D Solid, and then in the bottom toolbar, use the copy tool, reflect about, and then reflect it about the center of the screen porch. And then if we come over to our 3D camera, you can see how we now have the screen porch complete. And that's one method for creating a screen porch using the deck railing tools and the 3D Solid tools. There's a few optional steps you could take here to save you time the next time you need to create a screen porch. First, we can select this screen and then add it to our user catalog so that the next time we create a porch, we can quickly access the screen and drop it into the plan. Additionally, we can also select the deck railing and add that to our user library so that we can quickly start drawing a screen porch. Let's take a look at this by going over to our floor plan view, pressing spacebar, selecting one of our deck railings, and then adding that to our user catalog, and you can see where that came in. Next, if we shift over to the side of the house over here, with our deck railing that we just added to the user catalog selected, we'll come in and left click and just draw out the shape of the screen porch. And then if we come back to our 3D camera, you can see how the deck railing with the post and beam settings are already started. And then we would add a roof over this room and then just add the 3D solid going around the outside of the screen porch. So that's one method for creating a screen porch. Let's press undo a couple of times. Go ahead and shift our 3D view to the back of the house and then close our library browser. Next, let's take a look at the second method for creating a screened porch, which involves combining the screen, top rail, bottom rail, and balusters into a millwork symbol, and then using the millwork symbol as a panel in place of the traditional balusters and rails. So to get started, let's go ahead and delete the 3 existing screens that we have in the plan. And then let's go to our elevation view. And then what I like to do is get an understanding for how much space I have to work with between our posts and the underside of the beam and the top of the deck planks by going up to our standard polyline tool and then coming over to this point and then just left clicking and dragging a standard polyline encompassing the space. And then I'm going to select it and then use that move handle and drag it off to the side. And now I know I have about that much space to work with between our posts, the underside of the beam, and the top of the deck planks. Next, let's add the top rail, bottom rail, and balusters by clicking and dragging a deck railing over into this area of the plan. So to do this, we're going to go to our floor plan view, and then we're going to shift our focus over here, and then just go over to our deck railing tool, and then just click and drag a deck railing roughly in this area of the plan. Next, let's go over to that elevation view, and you can see where that railing came in, and then we're going to press space bar, select that railing, and then extend the ends until it's the same width as that polyline. Next, we don't need these current newels that are on the deck railing since we're going to be using the posts over here. So with that deck railing selected, I'm going to open up its specification, and we're going to go to the rail style panel, and then uncheck Newell's Posts. You can see how that looks in our 3D preview, and I'll go ahead and click on OK. And then let's press spacebar, and then next select that standard polyline and convert it to a 3D solid with the convert button in the bottom toolbar. Select we're going to be converting it to a 3D solid, and then click on OK. And then we'll go over to the depth and change that to 3/16 of an inch, and click on OK. And then you can see how that's coming in the 3D view. And if we go back to our floor plan view, you can see where that 3D solid is positioned and where the deck railing is positioned. So I'm going to press spacebar, select the 3D solid, select that move handle, and then just click and drag it until it's up against the deck railing. And then we're going to go back to the elevation view. And then next, let's apply that screened material to the 3D solid. So we're going to open up the library browser, select the screen material, and then click to apply it to the 3D solid, and then press spacebar, close the library browser, and then select the 3D solid, and then just click it and drag it down until I have it roughly in my desired position. And then next, we need to select the 3D solid and the deck railing and convert it to a millwork symbol. So we're going to go over to our floor plan view, press spacebar, draw a marquee over this area. In the very bottom left-hand corner, you can see that I have 2 objects currently selected, the 3D solid and the deck railing. And we're going to click on this button that says Convert to Symbol. And we're first going to give our symbol a unique name. And then next we need to specify a symbol category. And specifying a symbol category is important because it will allow our panel to interact with the deck railing tools in the software. So from the symbol category dropdown, we're going to specify that it's going to be a millwork symbol. And then click on OK. And you can see how that gets added to our library browser. And then back in the plan, I'm going to go ahead and press spacebar. And then let's jump back to our 3D view. And with that deck railing screen panel selected, I'm going to come over to the balusters and I'm going to zoom in close and just click on one of the balusters and watch what happens. The program replaces all of those balusters with that screen panel that we just created. So what we need to do is open up this deck railing specification, remove the top rail, remove the bottom rail, and then tell the program that instead of using balusters, we're going to be using panels. So in the 3D view, I am going to press spacebar, select all three of our railings, open up their specification, and then on the rail style panel, we're going to specify that instead of using balusters, we're going to be using panels. And then under the top bottom rail options, we're just going to uncheck include top rail, include bottom rail, and raise lower bottom. And you can see how that looks in the 3D preview. And let's go ahead and click on OK. And you can see that adjustment in the 3D view. And then the next thing we need to do is have these panels going to the underside of the beam. So we're going to go to our floor plan view. We're going to select the cross-section elevation tools, select the back-clipped cross-section, and then just come into the screen porch and click and drag a clip through this area. And then next we're going to zoom in and then go to our dimension tools, select the end-to-end dimension, go to the top of the panel, and left click and drag an end-to-end dimension to the underside of the beam. We'll get a message saying we've dimensioned the cross-section lines and point markers will be used instead. We'll go ahead and accept this. And now we know we need to increase the railing height by 5 feet, 3 7/8 of an inch. So let's pull our elevation view side by side with our 3D view. And then in the 3D view, we're going to hold Control and select all three of those railings. Open up their specification. We're going to go to the Newels and Balusters panel, and then we're going to add 5 feet and 3 7/8 of an inch. Press Tab. You can see how that looks in our 3D preview, and then we'll click on OK. And you can see what that looks like in the 3D view, and we can go ahead and close our back-clipped cross-section. Let's go ahead and close our other elevation. And then next, with that deck railing screen panel selected, we're going to come into the plan and we're going to click on the panel. And you can see how that updates on just this one panel. If I press undo there, in the bottom left-hand corner, I'm next going to switch from being in component mode to being in plan mode, and then come over to the deck railing and click once. And you can see how it updated all three of those deck railings in the plan. So if we rotate around our screen porch, you can see that looks pretty good. And if we zoom in, one thing you may notice is that the screen is on the inside of the deck railing instead of the outside. What we can do is in our library browser, we can rotate the Milwork symbol 180 degrees so that the screen is positioned on the outside of the railing. So in the library browser, I'm going to come over to that deck railing screen panel and right click, select Open Object. And then on the left-hand side, we're going to go to 3D. And here you can see we have an option for rotation. And we'll go ahead and rotate that twice, 180 degrees. And then click on OK. And then with that deck railing screen panel symbol selected, we're going to come into the plan and click to replace it. And you can see how the screen is now generating on the correct side. So that's going to be the second method for creating a screen porch. And then just like with our first method, what you might do to save you next time you have to create a screen porch is select this deck railing, add it to your user catalog. You'd want to right click on it and give it a unique name. But then in your floor plan view, you can simply have that deck railing selected and then just click and drag where you would like the screen porch to be in the plan. And then if we come over to the 3D view and rotate to the side of the house, you can see how our screened porch is already started. Let's press undo a couple of times, close our library browser, bring our view back to our screened porch, and we can go ahead and delete this 3D solid and deck railing that we're no longer using. And then next, look at some options for adding a screened door into the screened porch. First, we're going to add a door and design it to be appropriate for a screened porch scenario. And then we'll look at some options for the space above the door. The first option will have a small beam and small transform above the door. The second option will drop the beam so that it resides directly over the door, which will also entail lowering the roof. So let's get started by adding the door and then looking at our first option. So what we are going to do is go over to our floor plan view, And we're going to press spacebar, select the door tool, select the hinge door, and come in and place it in our deck railing. And then we're going to select it and then change the swing side. And then we'll also turn on our temporary dimensions, select the door again, and then position it how far we want it from the wall. And then we'll turn off our temporary dimensions. And then we'll go back to our 3D view, and you can see how the door is coming in. Next, let's design it to be more appropriate for a screen porch scenario by double-clicking on it. And under the door style, we're going to change it to be a glass panel. Next, you can change the size and position of the door. Under the panel size, you can change the bottom offset and have it be an automatic height or a manually specified height. Next, under the panel frame widths, let's go ahead and adjust this to be 3 inches on all sides. On the left-hand side, we're going to come over to where it says casing and then uncheck that we're using an interior casing, exterior casing, and then has a sill or a threshold. And the last adjustment we'll make will be to our hardware. We're going to specify for both the interior and exterior handle, we're using a knob, and then click on OK. And you can see how that updates in the 3D view. And then we're going to use the material eyedropper tool to select the material off the screen, and then make sure we're in component mode, and then apply it to the glass on the door. And you can see how that door is more appropriate now for a screen porch. And then if you would reuse this door in future plans, you could select it and then add it to your user catalog. Next, let's go ahead and get that beam over this door. And this beam is just going to be a 3D solid. So we're going to come over to our floor plan view, select the 3D solid tools, and come in and click and draw a small 3D solid in this space, and then double click on it to open up its specification. And then we'll adjust the width to be 5.5 inches, the depth to be 36 inches, and the height to be 3.5 inches. We'll click on OK. And then we'll use the center object tool, make sure we have it centered over the door, and then use the center object tool again, make sure we have it centered over the railing. And then if we go to the 3D view, you can see where the 3D solid is currently coming in. So let's double click on it to open up its specification. And under the elevation, we're going to change the elevation reference to be absolute. And then we're going to specify the elevation at the bottom of the 3D solid should be at 80 inches. And then click on OK. And you can see how that looks in our 3D view. And then we're going to again use that material eyedropper tool, select the material off one of the posts, and then apply it to the 3D solid. Next, let's add that transform area above the door. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take this door on the bottom, make a copy of it, and then adjust it to be more appropriate for the transform. So in the 3D view, I'm going to select the door, select the copy tool, and then just drag out our copy. And then we'll double click on it to open up its specification. And then we're going to make a handful of adjustments to it. For the height, let's go ahead and adjust that to be at 15 inches. We'll make our final adjustments to the height here in a minute. But next, let's go to the hardware panel on the left-hand side. And we're going to remove the handles. We'll come down to hinges, and under number of hinges, select 0. And click on OK. And you can see how that looks. And if we come over to the floor plan view, you'll notice that we still have the swing indicator. So you can double click on that door to open it up the specification, and under swing angle here, adjust that to be 0, or make the adjustment manually in the 2D view. And you can see how that looks better in our 2D view. And if we come over to the 3D view, you can see how that's starting to come in. And next, let's specify what height it should be at. So I'm going to double click on it. And under floor to bottom, we'll specify that it's going to be at 83.5 inches. And we'll press tab and then click on OK. And you can see how that looks in the 3D view. And then let's make sure we have it centered over our door and beam. So we're going to do this in the floor plan view. Select the transform, click on the center tool, come over to the door and click once. And you can see how that looks in the 3D view. And then the last adjustment we're going to make to it is we're going to select it and then use that handle at the top to get the height appropriate. And there we have it in place. So that's going to be the first option for adding the door. For the next option, we're going to remove that small beam and that small transform we just added, and then drop the beam that's at the top of the post so that the beam resides directly above the door. So back in our 3D view, let's start by deleting the transform, deleting the beam, and then just like we did earlier, we're going to measure the distance between the top of the door and the underside of the beam in a backlit cross-section view. So we're going to go back to our plan view, select our cross-section tools, select the backlit cross-section, and click and drag a small clip through the door. And then we'll zoom into it, and then use the end-to-end dimension tool like we did earlier. And click on OK. We're fine with point markers. And there we know we need to drop the beam 1 feet 7 and 15/16 of an inch. So let's pull this side by side with our 3D view. And then to drop the beams on all three sides, what we need to do is lower the overall room height. So we're going to zoom into the room. Just click once and click on Open Object. We'll then come to the Structure panel on the left. And under Finish Ceiling, we'll press -1 feet 7 and 15/16 of an inch. And click on OK. And then if we zoom out in our 3D view, you can see how the beam dropped and it's in the correct spot. However, now we need to make some adjustments to the railing height. So what I'm going to do is in our 3D view, I'm going to press spacebar and I need to select all three railings. You can do this by selecting the first railing, holding Control, selecting the second railing, release the Control key on your keyboard, and then hold the Alt key. And while holding the Alt key, click on the scroll wheel on your mouse and rotate to the other side. And then release both the scroll wheel and the Alt key. And then zoom out just a little bit. And then hold Control and select that railing on the other side. So that's a trick for selecting some items, rotating, and then resuming selecting items. So with those three railings selected, I'm going to open up their specification. We're going to come to the Newels and Balusters panel. And under the height, we're going to subtract 1 foot 7 and 15/16 of an inch and press Tab. You can see how those are looking good in our 3D preview. And let's click on OK. And you can see how that adjusts the posts and the Milwork symbol panel. And now our 3D view looks correct. Now, one thing you might do is you may have noticed that when we added the door, we had a post come up on the other side of the door, and we also have a post in this area, and our panel looks a little tight. The reason this extra post generated is because our maximum on-center spacing between posts is set at 96 inches. If you wanted to remove the post on this railing, you can increase the post maximum on-center spacing so that the post doesn't generate. Let's go ahead and take a look at this, and let's first close this cross-section elevation view. And then in the 3D view, press spacebar, select this railing, open up its specification, and then go to the Newels and Balusters panel. And under spacing, you can see that's currently at 96 inches, but if we increase that to say 108 and press Tab, you can see how it removes that post. And then if we click on OK, you can see how that looks in the 3D view. And those are going to be the steps for creating a screened porch. Next, let's take a look at a few optional steps for creating this small deck outside of the screened porch. So let's pull our 3D view and our 2D view side by side and focus our attention in this area. And then in our 2D view, we're going to go up to our railing tools, select the straight deck railing, and then I'm just going to loosely click and drag our deck railing in this area of the plan. And you can see how that comes in the 3D view. And then next, let's remove the railing on this side. So I'm going to select it, and then in the bottom toolbar, specify that we want to make it invisible. And you can see how that removes it. Next, let's add some stairs going from the deck down to the terrain. So in our 2D view, we're going to go over to the stair tools, select the straight stairs, and then come over to that side of the deck and click once to place it. And you can see how it adds those stairs, and let's adjust them to be a little bit more appropriate for our scenario. So the first thing we're going to do is select the stairs, and then adjust them so that they're at the side of the screened porch and the side of the small deck. And then let's double click on their specification to open it up. And then we'll go to the railing option on the left-hand side. And then we'll uncheck railing left, railing right, and then click on OK. And you can see how that removes the railing. And then let's pull these stairs back just a little bit. And then in the 3D view, let's adjust the materials to match those of the deck by again using that material eyedropper tool, selecting the pressure treated material and applying it to the stringers, selecting the material eyedropper, selecting the material off the planks and applying it to the deck treads. And then the last thing we need to do is add a railing going down from the deck down the stairs. So in our 2D plan view, we're going to go over to the deck railing tools, select the straight deck railing, and I'm intentionally going to draw it away from the edge of the deck railing for the time being. And we're just going to click and drag it about in this area of the plan. And you can see how it generated in our 3D view, but it's a little bit hard to see in our floor plan view. One thing you can do is click in the general vicinity of it and then press tab to select objects in that area. And then let's come down to the draw order controls and then just bring that to the front. And then press spacebar. And now you can see that in our 2D plan view. And then let's adjust it so that it's following the stairs. So in the 2D view, I'm going to select it, open up its specification, come over to the rail style option on the left. And then down here, we're going to check follow stairs and then click on OK. And you can see how that looks in the 3D view. And then in the 2D view, with that deck railing selected, we're going to click on the center object tool, come over and center it off this railing. And you can see how that looks in the 3D view. And that's going to conclude this video. For more information on designing screened porches, please see the other learning resources on the website.